There are villages in this world where survival is not a choice, but a daily battle against nature itself. Perched on cliffs, floating on water, or hidden deep within unforgiving landscapes, these places exist where life should be impossible. Every path is dangerous, every moment uncertain, and every day demands resilience beyond imagination. Yet against all odds, people continue to live, adapt, and endure in ways that defy logic and limits. These are the impossible villages, where danger is constant, but so is the strength to survive. The Bajau sea nomad villages in Malaysia and the Philippines are communities that live directly above the sea, where houses stand on wooden pillars instead of solid land. Dozens of wooden homes are fixed into shallow seabeds and connected by narrow walkways, forming a settlement that depends completely on water levels and fishing resources. For centuries, the Bajau lived mainly on wooden boats and only gradually built permanent stilt houses when they needed more stable community life. Many Bajau divers must descend deeper than 65 feet, similar to a 6-story building, because most of their food and income lies underwater and cannot be reached from boats. Their livelihood relies almost entirely on natural fishing, and children grow up learning to control boats before they fully master reading and writing. At certain times, entire Bajau communities were forced to relocate due to political changes and shifting control of sea territories, proving their survival is tied to real risks beyond nature. In Iran, Kandavan is a village where people live directly inside cone-shaped rock formations created from ancient volcanic ash and hardened lava. Families carved deep into solid stone to form multi-level rooms, cutting stairways into rock and expanding inward instead of building outward. Local tradition says their ancestors chose stone homes for protection and durability, and descendants continue living in the same carved spaces today. Some rock cones rise more than 30 feet high, about 5 times taller than an average adult, shaped naturally over thousands of years before habitation. The porous volcanic stone helps regulate interior conditions, turning fossilized lava columns into stable living spaces for generations. How could terrain once formed by flowing lava become a permanent settlement for centuries? And what might happen if erosion continues over time? And the answer lies in thick rock walls and careful carving that preserves the natural load-bearing core. In Peru, the Uro's floating islands form an unusual settlement where entire islands are built from reeds and float directly on the water instead of solid ground. When walking across the surface, visitors feel the ground gently compress, because many layers of reeds are stacked together to create a floating base. The island platforms are constructed from thick reed layers several feet deep, forming a stable structure strong enough for houses and daily activity. Over time, the lower reeds slowly decay in the water, so residents regularly add fresh layers on top to keep the islands stable. A typical floating island can last about 20 years before the entire structure must be rebuilt using new bundles of reeds. Houses, boats, and many small structures in this community are all built from the same reed plant, creating a settlement that exists entirely on floating vegetation. In northern India, Phugtal Monastery is a Buddhist complex built directly into a cliff, centered around a natural cave formed through thousands of years of erosion. The monastery has existed for more than 1,000 years, comparable to many famous ancient cities, yet it still houses several dozen monks in isolation. Its architecture rises in tiers along the rock face, with prayer halls and live-in quarters anchored tightly against stone around the cave core. The dry terrain and lack of vegetation make farming nearly impossible, forcing the monastic community to rely on outside supplies for survival. Phugtal Monastery stands as evidence that spiritual purpose combined with engineering skill can transform a steep rock wall into a lasting center of learning. Way Rebo Mountain Village is one of the most unusual and isolated ancient villages in Indonesia, located on a high mountain slope deep inside a remote tropical forest. Way Rebo stands about 3,600 feet above sea level among dense mountains and forest, so the village already exists far beyond ordinary living conditions. There is no road that reaches the village by vehicle, and the final part of the journey requires about 3 to 4 hours of steep hiking through forest trails. The entire community consists of traditional cone-shaped houses arranged in a circle around a ceremonial yard, forming a closed living structure high in the mountains. Each Ambaru Nyang house has 5 functional levels used for living space, food storage, and ritual activities, showing how people adapt to isolation in a difficult landscape. Way Rebo survives as a rare mountain settlement where people continue living among steep slopes and deep forest, far beyond the easy reach of the modern world. Baduy villages in Indonesia are known as a community where people continue living with traditional customs while limiting the use of modern technology. Walking along the dirt paths, visitors can see bamboo houses raised on wooden posts, arranged in small clusters across forest hillsides. Why are most houses built from bamboo and wood? Natural materials keep the structures light, durable, and well suited for the surrounding tropical forest environment. The settlements stand about 2,000 feet above sea level, creating villages positioned across elevated forest terrain. Most movement through the area happens on foot, along narrow trails, stretching for several miles across the forest landscape. In Badui villages, daily life continues among bamboo roofs, farmland, and forest paths, forming a landscape where traditional rural life still endures across generations. In western Mongolia, the high-steppe region called Saksai attracts visitors who want to observe nomadic life and the long tradition of hunting with golden eagles. Standing across the wide grasslands, people see dry steppe stretching toward the horizon, while distant rocky mountains form natural walls around the valley landscape. Cultural studies often describe this region because local hunters train golden eagles to assist in capturing small animals across the open steppe. A fully grown golden eagle can reach a wingspan close to 7 feet, giving the bird enough power to control prey during fast dives. While traveling across this land, nomadic families live in portable round tents and move dozens of miles each year, searching for new pasture for livestock. Researchers also record that hunters and their trained eagles often remain partners for many years through careful training within the nomadic way of life. Not on solid land, but directly above water in Nigeria, Makoko exists as a community built entirely on wooden stilts where hundreds of thousands of people live without traditional ground foundations. The population is estimated between 100,000 and 300,000 people, similar to a medium-sized city, with daily life supported only by wooden poles driven into shallow water. There are no normal roads, so small wooden boats serve as the main transport for school, trade, and moving building materials between tightly packed houses. In the northern mountains of Vietnam, Lolo Chai village attracts attention because a community lives in traditional rammed earth houses surrounded by limestone terrain. Walking along the stone paths, visitors notice low rock walls surrounding courtyards and walkways, creating a clearly organized structure across the settlement. Traditional houses here include rammed earth walls about 2 feet thick, which help the buildings remain stable on hard, rocky ground. Builders create these walls by compressing layers of soil inside wooden frames until the earth forms a dense and durable structure. Many homes in the village have existed for more than 100 years and continue serving as everyday living spaces for local families. Daily life often includes traditional activities such as drying corn in stone courtyards, repairing rammed earth walls, and gathering together in shared village spaces. In the mountains of Myanmar, there is a village called Intha Floating Villages, where people built an entire community on water and continue living in a landscape filled with constant risk. The entire settlement stands on wooden stilts, driven into the lake bed, and connected by narrow walkways and boat docks, forming a fragile living space suspended above the water. Here, the Intha people developed a unique way of rowing boats with one leg standing at the stern and controlling the paddle to keep a clear view across reeds and floating gardens. The water stretches for more than 10 miles and becomes the main lifeline where all movement fishing and transport of goods depend entirely on small boats. Floating gardens made from plants and lake mud are tied together and anchored with bamboo poles, turning the lake surface into long drifting strips of farmland. At an elevation of nearly 3,000 feet above sea level, Intha Floating Villages show clear evidence of a community that transformed open water into a permanent place to live. In the highlands of Papua New Guinea stands Asaro Village, a settlement that makes many visitors curious when men appear wearing large clay masks during traditional rituals. Standing in the open ground of the village, you can see pale masks with large round eyes covering the entire head and creating an unusual visual scene. The village lies about 5,000 feet above sea level, where natural clay is widely available and becomes the main material used to create mudman masks. These clay masks often rise higher than 1 foot and are dried for several days before being worn in cultural performances. Around the settlement, low hills and traditional farmland shape the landscape where local communities maintain long-established practices connected with the land. One notable detail is that a finished mudman mask made from local clay can weigh more than 5 pounds after the material hardens completely. Ushguli in Georgia stands within the rugged Caucasus Mountains, where a community still lives at more than 7,000 feet, amid sharply divided rocky terrain. More than 30 stone defense towers, many rising about 70 to 80 feet, like a tall ancient tree with layered branches, were built between the 9th and 12th centuries to protect families during clan conflicts. Each large family owned its own tower, forming a connected defense network, and stories of villagers retreating inside during attacks are still passed down through generations. Narrow valleys and steep slopes forced houses to remain low with thick walls, placed close together in compact clusters to adapt to the difficult mountain environment. Landslides and heavy snow once cut the village off completely, yet residents continued farming and daily life in near-total geographic isolation. Ushguli is recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site because it preserves an almost intact medieval village structure with defense towers that have survived for more than 1,000 years. Tanah Toraja villages on the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia are among the most dangerous villages in the world, where people continue living between steep mountains and burial cliffs filled with hanging coffins. At this place, traditional Tonkanen stilt houses stand on steep slopes facing rice terraces and tall rock walls with coffins, placing traces of the living and the dead inside the same landscape. Many bodies are not buried immediately and can remain inside family homes for many months or even many years until relatives are able to organize a large traditional funeral ceremony. Burial spaces are often placed high on cliff walls, where wooden coffins and carved statues of the dead look over the valley, creating a scene that feels sacred and unsettling. The whole Tanataraja region spreads across nearly 800 square miles of rugged mountains, where ancient villages remain surrounded by steep slopes and deep valleys. This highland landscape rises from about 1,000 feet to about 9,000 feet, making every village feel like a constant survival challenge between harsh mountains and ancient rituals. In northeastern Russia, Oymyakon is a permanently inhabited village built on permafrost hundreds of feet deep, where survival depends entirely on frozen ground conditions. The population is about 500 people, fewer than seats on a large commercial airplane, yet the community maintains school and daily social life. Vehicles must run for many hours to avoid mechanical failure, and stories of phone batteries dying within minutes are common local experiences. The frozen ground forces houses to stand on raised supports to prevent damage as surface layers shift through seasonal cycles. Hard soil throughout the year makes farming almost impossible, so food mainly comes from reindeer meat and fish preserved using traditional methods. When learning about Oymyakon, do you ever wonder why people chose to remain across dozens of miles of open, frozen land? Have you ever imagined living with your family in a village built directly against a near vertical cliff? That is daily life in Atulia village in southwestern China. Before 2016, residents climbed bamboo ladders rising about 2,600 feet, nearly equal to 3 Eiffel Towers stacked together. In 2016, after images of children climbing spread worldwide, more than 2,500 steel steps were installed to improve access. Wooden and rammed earth houses stand close to the cliff edge, while narrow farm plots, only a few feet wide, cling to hard rock. With no road reaching the settlement, cement bags and building materials were carried by hand across thousands of steep steps for years. Atulia village now represents human adaptation to extreme terrain, showing how determination can turn a towering rock wall into a lasting home. In New Mexico, United States, Taos Pueblo is a Native American community where multi-story earthen buildings have stood continuously for more than 1,000 years. More than 150 residents still live inside these ancient structures and work together each year to repair and recoat the thick walls. The buildings are made using packed earth mixed with clay, straw, and water, shaped into sun-dried bricks that form strong, layered walls. Traditional design avoided ground-level doors, using wooden ladders through the roof to improve defense during periods of historical conflict. In 1992, UNESCO recognized Taos Pueblo as a World Heritage Site, confirming over 1,000 years of continuous human settlement. How can a complex built from earth survive for centuries across a wide, high desert plateau without concrete or steel support? Not on solid land, but within the seasonal waters of Cambodia, Kampong Phluk exists as a stilt village that survives by fully adapting to changing water levels. The soft alluvial ground cannot support heavy concrete structures, so wooden houses are built to remain flexible against natural shifts instead of trying to control them. At certain times, the water rises high enough for boats to pass directly beneath house floors, making daily living space and open water almost overlap. Residents depend mainly on fishing for income, and this strong reliance on aquatic resources has allowed the community to endure repeated cycles of rising and falling water. When the water increases, village paths turn into canals and children travel to school by boat, showing how transportation follows the rhythm of nature. Houses stand about 20 feet above ground, similar to a two-story building, supported by long wooden pillars to withstand water that can rise several additional feet each year. Mentawai Island villages in Indonesia are considered one of the most isolated and primitive indigenous communities still surviving in Southeast Asia today. The villages are located deep inside dense tropical rainforest, where roads almost disappear and people travel mainly by wooden boats along winding rivers through the forest. The traditional communal houses called uma can stretch longer than 80 feet, about the length of a small passenger airplane body, built on wooden stilts to protect families from floods and wild animals. Life here depends on hunting, fishing, and collecting natural medicine plants in the forest, where people must learn survival skills directly from the surrounding wilderness. A powerful offshore earthquake in 2010 created a tsunami around 10 feet high that destroyed several settlements and showed that these villages stand near an active tectonic zone. The clearest human mark in Mentawai Island villages is the ancient tattoo tradition, where the human body becomes a living record of the life journey of people who survive in the forest. Sapa mountain villages in Vietnam exist within steep, high mountain terrain, where people chose to live directly on slopes instead of flat ground. The terraced rice fields were shaped along contour lines over hundreds of years with hand-built earth walls that hold water and prevent soil erosion on the mountain sides. Houses are built low and close to the land, scattered across narrow valleys to create a settlement structure that adapts to terrain rather than forcing it to change. This area stands at an average elevation of about 5,000 feet, where steep slopes and tight valleys require manual labor and careful planning for building and farming. Stories of villagers carrying soil and stacking terrace walls by hand still show a community willing to work hard to secure every small piece of land. This terrace system has lasted for centuries because farming knowledge and land-shaping skills have been passed carefully from one generation to the next. In Hong Kong, Tai O is a fishing village where wooden houses stand on deep stilts in coastal mud, forming a settlement partly on land and partly over water. Hundreds of wooden homes cluster tightly together, with fishing boats anchored at each doorway and long rows of seafood hanging beside narrow paths. The stilt houses are built close to one another and connected by slim wooden walkways instead of concrete streets across the wet ground. After major storms during the 20th century, residents repeatedly repaired and rebuilt their homes, turning reconstruction into part of community memory. Tai O has existed for more than 300 years, older than modern landmarks like Burj Khalifa, and families still rely on the same wooden foundations. What allowed wooden posts driven into mud to support an entire community for centuries, while modern neighborhoods depend on steel and concrete? And the answer lies in stilt design, adapted to tides and constant maintenance by residents. What makes Loktak Lake, located in the Indian state of Manipur, appear so unusual, where floating islands drift slowly across the surface of a vast freshwater lake? The lake covers about 110 square miles, forming a large water body where hundreds of floating vegetation masses spread across the surface. Traveling by boat across the lake reveals circular patches of vegetation and small houses resting directly on floating ground above the water. These floating masses, called fundas, can reach a thickness of about 10 feet, which allows people to walk, build houses, and place fishing tools. However, these floating islands may slowly shift with water movement, which sometimes creates dangerous conditions for people living on them. Local residents also shape vegetation into large floating circles used for fish farming, which creates distinctive round patterns visible from above. In the waters of Colombia, Santa Cruz del Islote is an inhabited island covering about 2 acres where more than 500 people live close together. The island was formed from coral and sea rock, built up over many years, creating a small piece of land surrounded entirely by open water. Houses stand wall to wall with narrow concrete paths, only wide enough for one person, so every movement through the village requires careful steps. There are no cars or motorcycles. Daily life depends on boats and human effort, and fresh water must be brought from outside sources. Fishing families have remained here for generations because of rich marine resources. But how can a space smaller than many parking lots support such a dense society? They have organized life around the sea, shared limited resources, and maintained strong community ties. Santa Cruz del Islote proves that people can build a stable community on land barely larger than a football field in the middle of the ocean. Look at the Ifugao rice terrace villages in the Philippines, where steep mountainsides have been turned into massive layers of rice fields that resemble the steps of a giant natural staircase. Here, the terraces spread across about 62,000 acres on mountain slopes, rising above 8,000 feet, covering an area similar to a medium-sized city and climbing upward like a massive wall of land. The terrain here is steep and vulnerable to landslides, so every level of farmland must be held in place by stone and earth walls that grip tightly onto the mountain. Water for the entire system is guided from forests on the mountain's summit through narrow channels, flowing from terrace to terrace like an irrigation network suspended along the cliff. Many studies show that this terrace system has existed for about 2,000 years, meaning the fields clinging to these slopes are older than many modern nations. Even today, UNESCO continues to warn that the region faces powerful earthquakes and increasing damage risks from repeated storms and floods. In the eastern highlands of Myanmar, Kayan villages are known for women wearing brass neck coils weighing more than 25 pounds, which push the shoulders downward and create the appearance of a longer neck. Many girls begin wearing the first coils at about 5 years old, and additional rings are gradually added over time until the structure forms a solid metal spiral around the neck. Traditional weaving still survives inside the villages, where a single, handmade textile usually requires about 3 to 5 days of work on a wooden loom. Most houses are built from bamboo and local timber and raised above the ground, which helps reduce moisture in a highland environment reaching roughly 3,000 feet above sea level. The landscape usually consists of small clusters of wooden homes separated by several dozen feet, while surrounding forests and fields support small-scale farming for daily food supply. At the northern edge of the Philippines, Batanes Island's villages stand among wide grass hills and tall cliffs facing the vast Pacific Ocean. Houses in these villages are built with stone walls, about 3 feet thick, heavy grass roofs, and small windows designed to resist strong ocean winds. This architectural design allows Ivitan communities to maintain stable homes, even as powerful storms regularly cross the islands. Walking along coastal roads, people see long grass hills stretching for many miles toward the edge of high sea cliffs. The islands lie about 100 miles from Taiwan, and constant ocean winds prevent the growth of tall trees across much of the landscape. Many settlements still preserve stone houses and a traditional fishing lifestyle, maintained by Ivatan families across generations. In Benin, Ganvi exists as a floating village built entirely on water, where thousands of stilt houses replace the idea of solid ground. The entire foundation relies on thousands of wooden poles driven deep into the lake bed, keeping homes stable across hundreds of square miles of water. More than 20,000 people live here, similar to the population of a small town, yet daily life, from school to trade, happens by boat. Since the 17th century, residents moved onto the lake to avoid slave raids, turning open water into a long-term refuge. Sitting in a small canoe, moving between tightly packed houses, you realize there are no streets here, only water connecting every family. There are no roads inside the village. Movement depends on wooden boats, and schools and shops stand raised above shifting water levels. In the coastal waters of Thailand stands Koh Phanyi, a village that makes many visitors curious because nearly the entire settlement rests on wooden stilts above the sea. Walking along narrow wooden walkways between stilt houses, you can observe daily fishing life taking place directly above the surrounding water. The community began forming more than 200 years ago when fishing families built elevated homes to adapt to living over the sea. Wooden houses stand close together and are linked by boardwalk paths and small docks which shape a compact floating neighborhood. Today, about 1,000 people live in Kopanyi, with most residents staying in stilt houses supported by wooden poles fixed into the seabed. Another notable detail is that villagers constructed a floating soccer field using wooden planks so children and adults could play sports above the water. Ine Funaya village, along the northern coast of Kyoto in Japan, is known as a unique coastal settlement where wooden houses stand directly beside the water and connect closely with traditional fishing life. When approaching the village from the sea, rows of two-story wooden houses appear along the shoreline, creating an unusual coastal architectural landscape. More than 230 Funaya houses now line the bay, forming a continuous band of wooden buildings following the natural curve of the water edge. The Funaya architectural style dates back to about the 17th century, showing how residents designed homes that function together with boat docking and fishing work. From the bay, wooden balconies and sliding doors facing the sea create a long visual line of coastal structures extending along the water. In many homes, the lower level remains a docking space for fishing boats, while the main living area continues to operate on the upper floor. In northern Thailand, Mae Kampong village forms a traditional wooden settlement built along a mountain slope, surrounded by dense natural forest. Walking along narrow paths that follow the terrain, visitors observe wooden houses, arranged step by step across the hillside. The village stands about 4,300 feet above sea level, which leads to homes being constructed across several levels on the mountain. Many houses use simple timber frames and include balconies facing the valley to provide additional living space. Local residents have long cultivated tea and coffee on nearby slopes as part of their traditional rural economy. Rows of wooden houses positioned close together along the hillside create a continuous settlement that connects the forest landscape with daily village life. Why is Barrio Highland Village in the northern mountains of Borneo in Malaysia often described as a remote settlement located within a wide highland plateau far from modern transport routes? Entering the plateau, visitors see open valleys where rice fields and grasslands spread across a flat landscape surrounded by mountain terrain. Barrio stands about 3,500 feet above sea level, creating the image of a small community placed on a high layer of land among mountains. The plateau covers about 50 square miles, providing enough land for several traditional farming areas across this remote highland landscape. From surrounding slopes, the plateau appears like a broad valley enclosed by mountain ridges, forming a clear open space within the rugged region. Along narrow earth paths, wooden houses and cultivated fields extend through the valley, presenting the view of a quiet farming settlement resting deep inside the highland. In Japan, Nagoro Village stands out because the number of life-size dolls is far greater than the number of real residents still living there. The village school was forced to close when there were not enough students, and today classrooms contain only dolls seated quietly at old wooden desks. Steep hills and limited transportation cause many young families to leave over recent decades, reducing the population to fewer than 30 people. There are now more than 300 dolls, almost 10 times the number of actual residents, a ratio that shows how deeply the community structure has changed. The first dolls were created by a local resident to represent her late father, and later she continued making figures to replace neighbors who had moved away. The presence of hundreds of dolls among traditional wooden houses creates a landscape where memory and present reality exist together in the same quiet space. What makes Amphawa Canal Village in Thailand a settlement that challenges the limits of human living when the entire community stands along a narrow canal where houses rise only a few feet from the water's edge, constantly facing the power of the flowing current. Many old wooden houses in the village are built on posts driven directly into the soft canal mud and have survived for more than 100 years while constantly enduring pressure from water and tides. Inside a canal space only about 60 feet wide, dozens of trading boats crowd together to form a dense, floating market where charcoal stoves operate directly above the water. Some sailing boats measuring about 15 feet long carry cooking stoves, food supplies, and vendors at the same time, turning the canal into a moving commercial corridor. A narrow wooden walkway built along the canal bank serves as the only path for residents, forcing daily life, trade, and transport to depend completely on boats. Amphawa Canal Village still preserves a canal settlement structure that formed in the 17th century, where many families have lived for generations while maintaining a life closely tied to the water. Can you imagine a stone village that has existed for more than 1,000 years on the edge of Hanoi, Vietnam? That place is Duong Lam, Ancient Village. Hundreds of old houses, built from laterite stone taken directly from the ground, form walls almost 2 feet thick, as hard as natural concrete, protecting families for many generations. The narrow brick paths twist like a maze, forcing people to move, slowly turning the whole village into a natural ancient fortress that is difficult to reach from outside. Many houses here have survived for more than 300 years, a long period equal to about 15 generations living together under the same old tile roofs. The large brick courtyards can hold several families working together like small village squares where crops are dried and daily community life happens. Today, Duong Lam ancient village feels like a huge living museum where laterite houses, village gates, and traces of ancient life still remain in the modern century. Bantayan Island fishing villages in the Philippines is a place where people live on the edge of the ocean, where low sandy shores and a vast sea define the limits of human survival. Here, fishing villages stand on narrow, low coastal land, where rising tides, coastal erosion, and saltwater intrusion constantly threaten homes and livelihoods. After Super Typhoon Haiyan, more than 11,000 houses on the island were completely destroyed, leaving communities forced to rebuild life from an empty shoreline. Life in Bantayan Island fishing villages depends almost entirely on the sea, from catching fish and drying seafood to repairing boats and trading food every day. Studies show sea level around Bantayan Island rises about 0.1 inch each year, pushing low coastal fishing communities closer to long-term flooding risks. Even so, generations of fishermen remain here, continuing the fishing tradition and leaving clear signs of human survival on the harsh edge of the ocean. Doi Chiangdao mountain villages in northern Thailand are settlements that cling to the slopes of a massive limestone mountain, rising more than 7,000 feet above the surrounding landscape. What allows people to survive on a giant karst mountain filled with steep cliffs and hidden underground caves like this? The answer lies in a tradition of survival that has developed for thousands of years in extremely difficult terrain. Beneath the mountain slopes lies a hollow limestone labyrinth with more than 40 caves and sinkholes, making the ground around the villages constantly exposed to the risk of sudden collapse. The routes that lead to these villages are often narrow trails, carved along cliff edges, where every step depends entirely on steep ground and sharp rock surfaces. forest types change gradually from the lower mountain to the higher slopes, forcing people to constantly adapt to shifting water sources, unstable soil, and difficult paths. This combination of towering cliffs, dense mountain forests, and a hidden network of underground caves makes Doichiangdao mountain villages one of the boldest places where people have chosen to live in Southeast Asia. Welcome to Bat Trang Pottery Village in Vietnam, a settlement beside the Red River where the landscape is shaped not by mountains or sea, but by clay and kiln fire. This pottery village has existed for about 700 years, where generations of families have continued the craft and turned the entire living space into a massive production workshop. Why have the people here accepted living with kilns for centuries, surrounded by piles of clay, charcoal smoke, and the constant risk of cracked ceramics? Because pottery is not just a job, but the entire economy and survival of Bat Trang. For many generations, residents built large brick kilns with thick walls, massive structures that act as the heart of production and require extremely precise control during firing. About 200 enterprises and nearly 1,000 households still work with pottery today, making the entire village function like one enormous handmade production system. The marks of centuries of production remain visible in ancient kilns, layers of heat-resistant bricks, and courtyards that stay covered with ceramics waiting to be fired. Dam Noan Saduak Canal Villages is a famous canal settlement in Thailand, created in the 19th century to connect farming regions with water trade routes. Instead of streets, residents expanded the canal network into hundreds of water paths, turning small boats into the main way to move food and goods. The irrigation system here supplies water to about 50,000 acres of orchards, but it also forces residents to constantly manage water to avoid floods and saltwater intrusion. Wooden stilt houses stand along the banks, while small bridges and boat docks connect homes directly to the canal, where daily life happens beside the water. Images of narrow wooden boats carrying fruits, cooked food, and household goods have become a strong travel symbol of Thailand, seen in many documentaries. For more than 1 century, Dam Noan Saduak Canal Villages has remained a clear example of a community adapting to a demanding water environment. Why has Van Phuc Silk Village in Hanoi, Vietnam, become a place that pushes human limits as people continue weaving silk inside a densely expanding urban environment? This craft village has existed for more than 1,000 years, surviving wars, economic changes, and rapid city growth, while the traditional weaving looms continue operating. The landscape feels unusual because the entire residential area works like a massive production space where homes, silk shops, and weaving looms operate side by side. In the past, Van Phuc silk was presented at an international exhibition in Marseille in the year 1931, marking a rare moment when an Asian craft village entered global trade. When the Eastern European market collapsed in the late 20th century, many looms stopped working, and the whole community faced the risk of losing its traditional craft. Today, the traces of hundreds of weaving looms, long strips of silk hanging across narrow streets, and constant production create an intense, handmade landscape rarely seen. Now imagine a community living among the massive mountain walls of Kalinga villages in northern Philippines, where settlements cling tightly to steep rock slopes like tiny points on a towering cliff. Many villages sit inside narrow valleys below mountain peaks, rising close to 9,000 feet, a height comparable to a skyscraper, nearly 800 stories tall if it stood upright. People survive here in raised octagonal wooden houses built on tall posts, a design that helps stabilize homes on steep ground and once protected residents from attacks beneath the floor. When long tribal conflicts once spread across the mountain communities, the Kalinga created the Bodong Peace Pact system to stop cycles of revenge and restore order. The wider Kalinga region covers about 1,200 square miles, a rugged mountain landscape roughly the size of a large city spread across deep valleys. The combination of towering mountains, deep river-carved valleys, and a long warrior history created a human settlement that pushes survival far beyond ordinary limits. On the rocky mountain slope of Buscalan village in northern Philippines, a small community clings to steep terrain where narrow stone paths and rice terraces shape every step of daily movement. The village stands at an elevation of about 4,000 feet, where every wooden house, stone stair, and terrace field is built directly into the steep mountainside. Because there is no road for vehicles leading to Buscalan village, all building materials, food supplies, and daily goods must be carried by people through narrow mountain paths. So what exactly makes a village hanging on a dangerous mountain slope like Buscalan village attract visitors from around the world? And the answer lies in the ancient Batok tattoo tradition, created using plant thorns and bamboo sticks and passed down through many generations of the community. Around 1,000 stone steps connect the houses and terrace fields, turning everyday movement into a constant mountain climb within the living space. Buscalan village survives as a living trace of human life on extreme terrain where daily living, farming, and tradition all remain closely tied to the rocky mountain slope. In West Sumatra, in Indonesia, there is Harau Valley villages, a valley where small villages sit beneath enormous rock walls like a town locked inside a natural stone fortress. The vertical cliffs of Harau Valley villages rise to about 1,700 feet, nearly as tall as 3 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other from the valley floor. Below these massive rock walls lie rice fields, dirt paths, and village houses, creating the striking scene of people living directly under giant walls of stone. Even though the landscape is surrounded by towering cliffs, people still grow rice, raise water buffalo, and build homes at the base of the rocks. The living space of Harao Valley villages opens through only one narrow entrance, making the entire valley feel like a giant natural stone fortress. At least 7 waterfalls drop straight from the forest above the cliffs into the valley, making the area both beautiful and dangerous as rock and water constantly shift. Kawah Ijen in Indonesia is widely known as a place where people manually mine sulfur directly inside an active volcanic crater. Walking down the steep crater path, visitors can observe workers carrying baskets of yellow mineral along the rocky slope leading upward. What creates the thick yellow mineral layers around the rocks? Sulfur-rich volcanic gas cools in open air and gradually solidifies into sulfur deposits. The crater lake covers about 0.2 square miles and is considered one of the largest natural acid lakes on Earth. The work here is considered extremely dangerous because miners carry between 150 and 200 pounds of sulfur across steep volcanic terrain. A notable feature is the system of metal pipes placed directly into volcanic vents to channel molten sulfur outward before it solidifies. Can you imagine a community surviving between dense tropical forest and a vast, wild ocean? This place is called Palawan Remote Villages in the Philippines. The island of Palawan stretches almost 1,200 miles long, a distance similar to a passenger plane flying across several cities, creating countless broken bays where villages become isolated. Small wooden houses stand right along the edge of the water, while steep forest and sharp limestone cliffs rise behind them, leaving the open sea as the only way out for many communities. Limestone mountains and dense jungle rise to nearly 7,000 feet, a height comparable to many skyscrapers stacked together, surrounding villages like a massive natural wall. Some communities still survive, using small wooden boats for fishing, farming near the shore, and moving through narrow bays where the landscape makes road travel almost impossible. Palawan remote villages reveal clear signs of people holding on inside an extreme ecosystem where forest, rock, and ocean push every community to live close to the limits of nature. Tagbanwa villages in the Philippines exist between tropical forests, sharp limestone cliffs, and dense coral reefs where every path of survival is connected to deep water and steep rock walls. The Tagbanwa communities live across an ancestral territory covering about 55,000 acres of land and sea, where the village boundaries are defined by coral reefs and open water. Wooden stilt houses made from bamboo are built along the forest edge and near the shoreline because the rough limestone ground and broken terrain make farming difficult in many places. Around the year 1225, historical trade records already describe Tagbanwa residents exchanging bird nests and marine resources with foreign merchants. The steep cliffs around the villages still contain ancient caves with burial remains and objects that show how humans survived in this extreme landscape for a very long time. In southern Peru, La Rinconada stands on a mountainside more than 16,700 feet above sea level, where human life pushes close to natural physical limits. More than 50,000 people have come here to work nearly 30 days without fixed pay, keeping all the gold they find only on the final day. At this elevation, oxygen drops to about 50% of sea level, so each step you take feels heavier and your chest works harder to keep breathing steady. The ground is formed from permanent ice and broken rock, while metal and wooden houses cluster tightly around dark mine tunnels carved into the mountain. There are no tall trees and no complete infrastructure, only grey stone, solid ice, and deep passages cutting through the mountain, like a harsh survival experiment. Not resting on dry land but spread across water in Ghana, Nzulezo is a village where every home and walkway stands raised above the surface to support daily life. All houses are built on wooden supports in shallow water without concrete foundations, so maintaining each structure depends directly on family responsibility. The population is about 500 people, similar to a small high school community, yet everyone lives closely connected through wooden platforms and narrow bridges. Nzulezo represents long-term human adaptation to wet environments, showing that a stable community can exist for generations without traditional land beneath it. Why do Sagada mountain villages in the Philippines attract curiosity when wooden coffins appear hanging along steep limestone cliffs as traces of an ancient burial tradition? Standing below these vertical rock walls, visitors can observe wooden coffins attached directly onto the stone surface, showing how local communities place the dead high above the ground. Some coffins rest about 100 feet above the ground, roughly equal to the height of a building with more than 10 floors. Anthropological studies estimate this burial practice has continued for more than 2,000 years, reflecting how local communities preserved funeral customs across many generations. During traditional funerals, relatives often use ropes and wooden ladders to raise the coffins onto limestone cliffs, a method frequently described in cultural research. Over long periods, the aging coffins gradually blend into rock and forest, creating a mountainside landscape that reflects the long cultural history of this community. What makes the Asmat River villages in Papua, Indonesia so unusual, where an entire community builds wooden houses on stilts above a complex network of rivers and wetlands? Traveling by boat across the area reveals wooden houses raised above the water with narrow walkways connecting many homes across the river surface. Traditional Asmat houses are often supported by wooden stilts reaching about 10 feet above the water, which helps prevent flooding on soft, muddy ground. Some wooden walkways inside the village extend more than 300 feet, forming elevated paths above the water instead of regular land roads. From above, the houses and long wooden paths form a visible settlement pattern, spreading directly across the river environment. Daily activities, including fishing, transportation, and social life, take place entirely on the river, making water the center of community life. Bolaven Plateau in southern Laos is known as an ancient volcanic plateau where red basalt soil forms the largest coffee-growing region of the country. Traveling across roads on the plateau, visitors can see wide coffee fields spreading across red slopes created by ancient lava flows that cooled millions of years ago. Agricultural research published in 2018 reported that basalt soils on the plateau contain rich volcanic minerals supporting stable coffee cultivation across large farming areas. The plateau stands about 4,000 feet above sea level, creating a high landscape clearly separated from the surrounding lowlands. Many agricultural zones developed here on volcanic rock layers that slowly weathered over millions of years through long geological processes. Because of the thick, mineral-rich basalt soil, the plateau now produces most of the coffee grown in Laos and remains a major center of national coffee production. In northern Laos, Nong Khiao is a small town set inside a narrow valley, surrounded by limestone mountains and a river flowing through its center. The cliffs around the town rise about 1,600 feet high, equal to more than 150 building floors stacked together. Because flat land is extremely limited, houses stand close to the riverbank, making daily life, fishing, and transport depend directly on the water. The karst landscape formed over millions of years as water-dissolved limestone, leaving a tight valley just wide enough for settlement. During the 20th century, residents used natural caves as shelters during conflict, turning geological formations into protective spaces. When you walk across the bridge over the river, towering rock walls enclosing both sides make you clearly feel the natural isolation shaping this entire town. What makes Khoi Kai Stone Village in northern Vietnam a place where almost every house is built from massive blocks of stone? As visitors walk through the stone-paved paths, they see grey walls made from heavy rock blocks, forming a settlement that has existed for more than 400 years. Many people wonder who first decided to build homes with stone, and how this building tradition continued through many generations. Some house walls measure about 2 feet thick, which helps the interior remain stable and allows these stone structures to survive for centuries. Standing among the wide stone courtyards and tall rock walls gives the feeling of entering an old settlement assembled from thousands of natural stones. After hundreds of years, these stone houses still stand firmly in the mountains and continue to be used as everyday homes by the people who live there. Ban Rak Thai in Thailand was formed on high mountains about 6,000 feet above sea level, where a Chinese migrant community built a tea village on steep, isolated terrain. The mountain slopes forced residents to grow tea on terraced fields to hold the soil and prevent erosion, turning sharp hills into layered farming systems. Thick earthen houses with heavy walls and traditional Chinese tile roofs still dominate the architecture, reflecting settlement history from the mid-20th century until today. The central lake not only shapes the landscape, but also provides water for daily life and agriculture, allowing the community to survive on limited mountain land. Tea cultivation has remained the main economic pillar for decades, and several local tea products have been exported to international markets. At an elevation nearly equal to stacking 6 Eiffel Towers, this village continues to exist across generations, proving strong cultural and economic adaptation on steep terrain. At Trunyan village in Indonesia beside Lake Batur, inside a giant volcanic crater, an ancient community still exists where harsh nature surrounds daily life and death remains visible within the landscape. What makes Trunyan famous is that the dead are not buried or cremated, but placed in simple bamboo frames and left outdoors to decompose naturally near the living settlement. A sacred tree called Taru Menyan stands in the burial area and is believed to release a natural fragrance that reduces the smell of decomposition around the exposed bodies. The mix of a closed volcanic landscape, a deep crater lake, an ancient Bali Aga community, and an open-air burial ground makes Trunyan one of the rare villages where human life exists beside extreme natural forces. In Myanmar, a small village called Indane Village stands on a rugged hillside where hundreds of ancient ruins rise among forest and stone, creating a landscape that feels both sacred and unstable. At this place, there are about 1,600 ancient stupas spread across the hillside, many brick structures cracked and leaning after many centuries of rain and erosion. From a distance, the whole area looks like a graveyard of ancient stupas, forming a strange and ancient scene that feels very different from ordinary villages. What makes this place shocking is not only the large number of stupas, but the fact that many structures are already decaying on the steep slope where local people still live and trade. The route to reach Indane village usually follows a narrow winding water channel about 5 miles long, making the journey feel like entering a place separated from the outside world. Even more unusual, the local community continues daily life, traditional markets, and religious activities right beneath the ancient stupas that are slowly deteriorating over time.